So if we were to take it into the context of actually when you're relocating to another country, and I do have a lot of clients that have utilized our services for such a purpose, a travel agent would basically deal with, okay, well, here's your flight. Brilliant. Okay. I might need a hotel when I arrive there. So I'm feeling rested and I just need to get on top of things before, because I may not necessarily have accommodation. Okay, fine. Okay, well, if you have got accommodation, then maybe we could organize ground transport. Okay, fine. But what sort of other things can you do? When it comes down to actually, I'm relocating, I've got all of my worldly goods in a 40-foot shipping container on a boat somewhere, let's say in the mid Atlantic. And you need to ensure where that is. You need to have the confidence that your tens, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of worldly belongings is safe and that it's being tracked. And you have access to a booking portal or to a system management system whereby you can see where your worldly belongings are. Well, yeah, okay, that's brilliant. So what other things can we look at? Oh, okay, well, I've got Felix the cat. Felix the cat's traveling with us. And when it comes down to poor old Felix, yeah, it's they're a part of your family. You want them to be treated with the same kindness and respect as to what you would. Ultimately, we have contracts with transportation services, and we would liaise with them and ensure that you had all the information you needed to be able to get all the vaccinations up to date, that you would apply for your pet passport, because a lot of people don't even realize pets require passports to travel as well. They don't just travel as a commodity. They are ultimately like us in needing the services of the passport. They need to have their microchips. They need to have their vaccinations up to date. Potentially might need to go into quarantine. These are all considerations that a lot of people have, but it's so much more than what anybody would even imagine. I'm just relocating over to another country. Okay, well, I need to set up accommodation because I need to live somewhere. I need to organize my flight over there. Okay, fine. Okay, so have you thought about extra baggage? Have you thought about Felix the cat? Well, what about your worldly belongings? How do you know that they're going to be safe? Because your worldly belongings could take 2 weeks on a container. Admittedly, they may even take about 8 weeks to leave port. I mean, there's at the moment a massive pressure on the logistics industry. Lack of lorry drivers, as we saw during the pandemic. A lot of containers building up in ports, just waiting on a boat to pick them up to take them to the destination. Because often containers will be picked up in Liverpool, shipped on the ship down to Dublin. That Dublin will go down to Cork, Cork over to Shannon, Shannon up to Iceland, Iceland over to Greenland, Greenland down to Boston, down to New York, down to Miami, before it finally arrives in your destination in Houston, Texas. I give a really bad example because obviously it doesn't normally take that way, but it can take a very long time for your worldly belongings. And ultimately, this is your goods. You need to ensure they're properly insured. That's another service that we're happy to consult on. Admittedly, there are some things that we can't do. Obviously, we can't go and take your cat down to the vet to go and have its vaccination. That's fairly obvious. Likewise, applications in terms of passports and visas often need to be done by the individual that's doing them. But it's not to say that we aren't happy to consult on these, because realistically, you want to ensure that, to use of a bad term, you're forewarned or forearmed with all the information that you need to make your journey more seamless. Because often people just think about, oh god, right, well, I've already sent the shipping container off. How do I suddenly get my extra bag of clothes? Okay, don't worry, I'll contact Dom. Dom will be able to tell me. He'll be able to liaise with the airline. We can talk about how much the weight restrictions are. We can weigh out the pros and cons of maybe upgrading a cabin, because when you travel in a premium cabin, often you'll get an increased baggage allowance. And that ultimately can help save some of the cost, but also make your journey a bit more comfortable.
It's really interesting, because one of the things we discovered in relocating was we did ours piecemeal, partly because of the situation my husband was in and it was his job we were moving for, and because his employer was handling certain pieces. So the other pieces I handled. But I think there are many unforeseens or surprises, things you don't anticipate. And I look back on that experience and I think if I'd worked with you, I would have been able to plan better, track better, and have an insight into the process, because I'm literally learning as I'm doing. So you know, there were all sorts of things that went a little bit pear-shaped. Like my husband's job was coming up quite suddenly, so we didn't have oceans of time. And I remember, you know, requesting the shipping company, but I hadn't factored in their schedule and, you know, when they could come, and we were moving out. So we had this dilemma of moving out, but having the stuff shipped in time, things like that. And we ended up lucky. But, you know, if you and I had been talking in the weeks beforehand, it's not like I didn't know we were moving, then you would have forewarned me of something like that and said, anticipate the following, bear in mind this and that. And I can really see the added value, because I found the entire thing stressful. And so if you go to an expert, you literally surrender to their expertise, then that removes a whole raft of the stress.